Are you gonna go to jail for reading manga?
Leave me alone!
Well, I hate to break it to you, but maybe that's actually a thing that could happen.
Stop breaking the law, asshole!
I don't know, maybe one day you're gonna wake up at 12 a.m. with the cops outside your house ready to haul your ass away with all your collections of hentai and gooner figurines and drag you off to the state penitentiary, where you'll spend the rest of your days next to a waifu pillow and a guy named Steve. Because you happen to buy a volume of Dragon Ball, maybe.
I'm concerned.
You know, it's a possibility. You never know. Is it likely? No, but it could happen. They're gonna dump all your hentai into a Iron Mouse pillowcase or whatever for your body pillow. You know, that's what's gonna happen. Or, I mean, you could do that. You know, what are you gonna do? Now, for a lot of people, fan service matters. A lot, I'm surprised to say. It's such a mainstay in the medium of animation that a lot of anime fans just don't really think about it all that much. It's just very normalized. However, for many, fan service is a war.
But war never changes.
A war with winners and losers. And unfortunately, very often, if you're fighting this war, you're already a loser to begin with, but I digress. Many claim that anime is being censored.
Because especially in this day and age, when it comes to anime, manga, light novels, we are seeing a lot of that rampantly kind of very much of apparent that there are some very much bad actors out there that are defending censorship.
And they point to the various cases of manga adaptations changing things to make them less scandalous in some way, while others point to government bodies establishing laws that will restrict and change what you watch.
This is like George Orwell's book, 1984.
But let's take a step back here, because I think one of those is a much bigger issue than the other. I think government overreach is way worse than, say, I don't know, them putting a little more fabric on an outfit, you know what I'm saying? Well, maybe we'll defend fan service by calling it what the fans want. I have a different argument. I think fan service should be defended not because it's enjoyable to fans, but because it's a form of art that can actually communicate meaning. Yes, this is the take I'm going with. It is art. You see, I kind of live in this weird middle ground of discussion. I feel like there's people who are like really hate anything that's scandalous and love everything that's scandalous, but they don't really think about what the scandalous material says and does for the work. A lot of people argue there's no value in fan service in media because they think it's superficial, they think it's extra. And you know what? Sometimes it is. But you have to acknowledge there is a middle ground here, one that acknowledges the benefits of this. I want to briefly touch upon fan service's origins in history animation. While sex sells has always been a staple in media, I mean, look at the poster for 1 million years BC. That poster right there, they sold 1 million tickets with just Raquel Welch in a bikini. In Japan, it's a little different. You can actually trace the exact moment fan service became a mainstay in the medium, and it's the 70s. Like a lot of trends in modern anime, you can thank Go Nagai for modern fans. Go Nagai is most famous for making Mazinger Z and Devilman.
If you ever say that again, I'll rip your fucking head off and shit down your neck, okay?
But the series Cutie Honey really helped make fan service a mainstay in the medium. Honey Kisaragi is a seemingly normal 16-year-old girl, 16-year-old Catholic schoolgirl from Japan, no big deal. I mean, she's really an android, but she doesn't know that till later, who has the ability to transform into a magical girl. Of course, to transform, she had to transmute all her clothing away. And this meant two things: a lot of very interesting outfits and a lot of naked honey. This series, which was an action shonen series, by the way, not a slice of life, shoujo, or what have you, Cutie Honey was an action shonen series aimed for boys. This is unlike a lot of magical girl stories at the time, which were more I Dream of Jeannie or Bewitched inspired slice of life stories for young girls. And it kind of shifted the levels a little bit here. It was one of the first magical girl stories to really push towards action-oriented narratives. I think along with Princess Knight, but that's a whole other story. Along with Princess Knight, it was a action series starring a girl, but unlike Princess Knight, it had the Go Nagai flavor of overt sexualization throughout. Dude, just read Devilman if you want to have an idea of how like really over the top Go Nagai is with this fan service, even outside of works like this. But Cutie Honey really helped mainstreamify that. Now, fans complain today about censorship in terms of what gets adapted into the anime version of the manga, but they'd have a field day if they saw how reduced the fan service was between the original Cutie Honey manga and its first anime adaptation in the 70s. Now, much like with Devilman, that came out around the same time, Cutie Honey's anime adaptation took creative liberties to smooth over the edges of the original. Gore, jokes, queer themes, and even the sci-fi elements were completely omitted, if not heavily reduced. There was still some fan service, but it was tame by comparison of what happened in the manga. But from there, manga pushed the bar a little further. Urusei Yatsura is one big one in regards to that. One of Rumiko Takahashi's earliest works. It had a lot of inappropriate jokes and fan service, and it got adapted pretty faithfully to television. In a similar fashion, Fujiko from Lupin III became a femme fatale icon in 70s anime, and that was in part due to, again, the outfits she wore and her incredible sense of style. Now, fan service would rise to popularity further in the 80s thanks to a number of factors, the first of which is the growing otaku subculture, with anime fans being able to make their own anime after growing up with it in the 60s and 70s. Studio Gainax is a great example of a studio founded on otaku ideals, at least at first, and they incorporated a lot of elements that were designed to make fans happy, specifically young adolescent fans and fans in their 20s who are all male. Well, some people might know Gainax for their infamous Gainax pose that happens in a lot of their shows. They were first famous for what they called the Gainax bounce, which I think you can figure out what it means. If you watch Daikon 3 or 4, you can see that all over the place. Those shorts helped establish Gainax as an animation studio that could produce higher quality material. And they'd only get more chances to prove this over time, and of course had more chances to weave in a little fan service throughout. And there's some big titles that we'll discuss more in detail that do that very thing. But another major factor in all this was the growing video market, where anime could be produced without conforming to television practices and standards, or well, even human decency in some cases. The 80s is one of my favorite era of anime because you got a lot of seriously unhinged stuff coming out that didn't conform to market-tested standards, what have you. People were just throwing crap at the wall and seeing what stuck. In some cases, it's stuck like, it's like a bad habit. A great example of a show that tried a lot of weird things that went in a different direction later on was Dream Hunter Rem, an OVA series from the 80s, I think 85 specifically. And while Rem became a popular magical series, surprisingly with young teens, and girls even, it started as, definitely not that, at all. In fact, some people have credited Rem with the initial waves of popularity of certain tentacle-themed experiences in anime. It's always surreal seeing a show that became more popular for families starting off in such a adult-centric medium, but I digress. But I think the early interest in this really showed there was a massive audience looking for animation that were more explicit, more adult-themed, in some cases inappropriate. And a lot of them were available right now if you look for them online. A lot of them are just loose on the internet, it's crazy. Some are available on Retro Crush right now for free. Well, I mean, behind their premium version of their free, you get what I'm trying to say. Some like Bubblegum Crisis and Dirty Pair used fan service to draw in an audience. A lot of people know the character designs from Dirty Pair, for example. But if you actually watch the show, you might be surprised to realize it's a really good science fiction series. And likewise, a lot of people remember Bubblegum Crisis for that opening theme in the first episode, the heavy metal thing that has a lot of those stylized shots. But if you actually watch Bubblegum Crisis, you get a really good cyberpunk story. So a lot of shows would incorporate fan service and not be totally devoted to it. It would be an extra thing to draw people's attention, but once you're in, there was a lot going on that was really worth watching. There's a reason why these shows are classics this day, because they're good. I think Gunbuster, though, is one of the highlights from this era, being one of Hideaki Anno's earliest productions, and it's one of his best, in my opinion. The way women are drawn in Gunbuster feels real. There's these little mannerisms that you see, even in the fan servicey scenes, that makes them feel more human. They feel like people you'd encounter. And there are scenes where they just open with each other. There's like locker rooms and all that. And they're just talking and chatting. Yes, it is exploitative in some way, but character is first and foremost. These decisions by the storyteller to show something the fans wanted to see, sure, but you also got a narrative alongside it. You got character development, furthering an idea of bonds between these women. And of course, the show would veer into some dark territory in the second half. I still believe that Christopher Nolan owes Hideaki Anno a check, because Gunbuster did what Interstellar did first, and it did it much better Yeah, I said it. And over time, this became a normal practice in anime. A lot of creators that that became very popular later on got their start drawing doujinshi, which are basically fan comics. And what kind of fan comics people want to read? The ones that are inappropriate. The ones that would never be adapted to a televised show. And so they made these exploitative, very erotic comics, and that proved to people, hey, this artist has a style that's interesting, this artist has a voice that's interesting. Lamb, the creator of Hellsing, there's so many that started with doujin before making really good manga that you've heard of. Now I also want to point out something here. In the 90s and 2000s, a lot of works started to make fun of how prevalent fan service was. I mean, it was all over the place, so you gotta make some jokes about it. Like how at the end of every episode of Evangelion, Misato Katsuragi teases fan service next episode, a promise that gets increasingly disturbing the further along you go. And the show, we'll discuss Evangelion later in the video, because trust me, its voyeuristic perspective of its characters is actually really interesting to discuss and deeply disturbing. Of course, mixed in with all this was some pretty weird stuff. Obviously, a lot of people know about the infamous Legend of the Overfiend, a horror erotic OVA series that helped popularize tentacles, if not in Japan, certainly in the West. Though bizarrely, movies like Possession were already doing stuff like with tentacles in the West already, and movies like Untamed I kind of see as a live action equivalent to what we got in Legend of the Fiend. If you really want to see that in live action, the Untamed's got you covered there, man. But again, Overfiend was intense. How Rob Zombie even referenced it in one of his songs. Anyway, there's several shows that knew to take things to new heights, to be memorable. One such story is Mysterious Girlfriend X. This manga and anime is on one hand a sweet romance, but it's also hidden in the most exploitative game of spit ever. Jesus, why the fuck did I write that? Why did I even write that? Mysterious Girlfriend X is just gross in my opinion, but it does a really great romance. If you like that sort of thing, you can get past, the slimy exterior of it all. And I feel like at times the fanservice got in the way of the story. A great example of this is Elfen Lied. If you thought the anime was a lot, the manga's way more, and it kind of bounced between deep horror and like Love Hina style harem hijinks. It's weird. Got more and more fetishy as it went on, and it's just bizarre and uncomfortable. And there's a reason the anime is remembered for being, kind of hokey and too edgy for me, and the manga is that thing you see in every bookstore that's hidden in plastic wrap. Then something happened. Not just to fan service, but the anime medium in general, and that's moe. The moe art style emphasized cute and adorable characters that made you want to protect them at all costs. Vulnerable, sweet, most anime characters today. But when did moe start? Well, I really have no idea, and no one really knows either. I tried looking it up, and some pointed to Sailor Saturn from Sailor Moon as one of the first true moe characters. I saw some people point to Cosette from Les Miserables, oddly enough, because it had a resurgence of popularity in Japan about the same time as the musical, and there's a lot of Cosette-themed anime that exists. This was a thing I kind of knew already, but I didn't realize how many Les Mis anime they are. There's multiple, and they all star Cosette for some reason. I guess because moe. I mean, personally, if you ask me, moe characters have been around since the beginning. Though I'd probably point to Magical Girl Minky Momo as being one of the first more overt moe characters. But again, that's a show for really young girls, so maybe that's less moe and more trying just to appeal to young girls. Moe's a different kind of thing. It has the protective angle to it too. You want to protect the poor characters. And Sailor Saturn, I think, gets a lot of those elements all in one. She embodies many of the early tropes of this. She's this frail, sickly girl, and the characters fight over her. She has those big eyes. Oh, in Sailor Saturn's name, it's Hotaru Homoe. Moe is built into her name. So yeah, I see why they point to Sailor Saturn so often as the origin point of moe. Now, several characters can arguably be considered moe throughout the 90s and early 2000s. But I guess as more creatives became aware of this growing trend in fandom, they decided to make characters more deliberately moe. Characters that you want to protect at all costs. Cute girls with rounded faces and these frail bodies who are sometimes profoundly ill or vulnerable. And then they cross it over with fan service. Now, when moe as a style, because it's not really a genre, it's more of a style, took off and kind of consumed fan service, things changed. And I know because, look, I'm not an expert, but I had eyes. I was an anime fan in the 2000s. There's a distinctive period in time before Haruhi Suzumiya and after Haruhi Suzumiya. It's not like a sharp line really, but it's like, before that you had these different types of character designs, and after that, for the next 5 years, it was moe blobs everywhere. I think a big reason for this is with the moe era is that characters were de-emphasized in favor of fitting the moe archetype. Every moe character felt kind of similar and vulnerable in a way that, well, we saw already. And because of that, I think it drew attention to how many tropes there were in anime at this time, and how many shows were kind of repeating the same cycles of things. Then it took over everything, it seemed. The biggest push came from Kyoto Animations, aka KyoAni. Now, KyoAni is a fantastic animation studio who've done a lot for the industry. They're one of the few studios, for example, that paid their artists a fair, livable wage, and they also experienced great tragedy when their head studio was burned down. So nothing I'm saying is shade on KyoAni. In fact, most of these shows I think are really good, but they are kind of accountable for pushing the moe style so hard. And again, it's not every studio. Again, there was Bleach, Naruto, that all came out at the same time, and they weren't really all moeified either. But thanks to KyoAni, you got Haruhi Suzumiya. They also put out Air, Canon, Lucky Star, Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, K-On!, the favorite show of Nazis online apparently.
Wow! I actually felt myself die a little inside!
And arguably their crowning achievement in the moe landscape, Clannad and Clannad After Story. And Violet Evergarden would come out later from KyoAni, but Clannad was their real big show that I think really proved how they could make something really moving and not just fun and entertaining. Clannad After Story is proof that moe as a style is not inherently bad and can in fact enhance and enrich some of the most deeply, profoundly depressing moments in anime ever. I think the scene in After Story involving the daughter in the snow, we're putting clips up right now. You know what happens in this scene. If you've seen this show and you didn't cry like a baby watching it, you're lying to yourself. Or have it, maybe you just, irony poisoned, I don't know to tell you. Hell, 4chan was sad when that aired. And again, Clannad's where that style works best. It's an art style that keeps you deeply connected to the set of characters that are being shown to you. And then they cruelly kill them off in front of your eyes from illness. Again, this is why I think Cosette from Les Miserables is probably the perfect moe character pre-Haruhi Suzumiya, because the goal is to make you hurt in your soul watching her. Yes, you in particular. The problem comes when these characters are being infantilized as well, and made into useless blobs that are then put into fan service situations. See what I'm going at?
Now, as you may know, I'm not a fan of fan service. It's not because I don't like the female form. I do. However, it's just the sheer amount that is in anime these days.
Some stories measure this out. There's the Western visual novel Katawa Shoujo, which balances out moe characters with a romantic story about a teen falling in love with disabled girls. Katawa Shoujo is one of the most surprisingly good things I've ever read. I am stunned that the concept of a love triangle story in a school for the disabled somehow turned out to be so moving and wasn't like really cheesy, but it works somehow. But most don't do it all that well. I think all you gotta do is watch Manga Sensei to see how it can go really badly.
俺はお前のことが好きだ。でもな、俺はお前の兄貴になりたいんだ。兄弟で恋愛なんてありえないだろ。
Now, in terms of fanservice being made illegal, remember that's what the video was about this whole time, there are two core discussions. There's one where fanservice is being actively censored in adaptations, and the other where it's becoming literally censored by government bodies and corporations, but I digress, where it's a crime to have fanservice. But again, we'll get there. Let's start with the easier thing to discuss because things change in adaptation all the time, and I don't think it's really an issue that's all that big a deal beyond, but you'll see what I'm talking about. After all, as we showed, the OVA market blew up in the 80s and 90s because you couldn't show certain things on TV. You had to go to video to do that. So there was always a push between creatives and what you could put on television. But if you're working within the television system, you gotta conform to its standards or you get kicked off the air.
Dipper gets a flyer from Wendy for a Halloween party, and it said on it like, Halloween party, bottles will be spun, no photos better wind up online, and they're like, bottles will be spun, spin the bottle reference. Impossible, never on the Disney Channel. We bugged before, this is the last straw, so I was like, okay, replace bottles will be spun with not S&P approved. I was just basically being a dick at that point, and they were like, our audience won't understand that reference. I'm like, yeah, but is it like against the rules? And they're like, not S&P approved, has been approved by S&P.
That's happened too. If your show is being marketed towards a certain demographic and shows things that are inappropriate for that demographic, even in Japan, you're gonna get pushback, so that things have to change at the creative level. They're putting a lot of money in this project. They gotta make some cuts here and there. A manga, you can put whatever you want in that, really, as long as it's published by the editor. But if it's on TV and multiple jobs on the line, make sure it makes a profit. Now, it is important to know a lot of people don't understand how Japanese television standards work, how time slots in Japan work, and etc. And I think a great example of a story in the West running wild despite nothing confirming it being true from the Japanese side of things was a story that was spread by plagiarist James Summerton. Though he, of course, like all things James Summerton said, did not come up with this himself, he stole it from someone else. Yuri on Ice, one of the most popular animes of 2016, was a sports show with a lot of gay themes, and a lot of fans watching it were questioning the show barely shows the main lead's kiss. So why was that the case? Well, a lot of people argued, and James Summerton echoed, that the reason Yuri on Ice wasn't more explicit with its relationship was because it was airing on a family television time slot. And because of that, Japanese television will not let them show Yuri or Victor hold hands or kiss or whatever, even though they do hold hands and kiss in the show. This is dumb though, because A, there were gay shows on those time slots also, but Yuri on Ice didn't debut on a family time slot, it debuted at 2:30 in the morning. So that doesn't apply, unless, you know, the 10-year-olds are really getting up at 2:30 to watch an ice skating anime. This doesn't really hold much water. But that said, many shows do get shuffled around due to content.
Would you care to explain why there are 4 different girls in your room?
A great example of this is Interspecies Reviewers, a show that goes far beyond fan service and straight up into fantasy erotica. Originally aired on Tokyo MX, Sun TV, and KBS Kyoto. However, Tokyo and Sun both removed the show from airwaves the moment it started airing because it was deeply inappropriate for their time slots. Otherwise, to watch the show, you had to either watch it on either a satellite station or an anime-centric cable channel. Thankfully, distribution was picked up by the Gifu Broadcasting System. At the same time slot, Yuri on Ice occupied several years earlier at 2:30 a.m.
Someplace with girls we've never tried before? Yeah, I'm with you.
Interspecies Reviewers and Yuri on Ice, same time slot. There's no reason they couldn't have shown them have more of a relationship. I don't know what to tell you, but still. Now this explains why some shows do have to change between adaptations. Because if you want a certain time slot, you gotta do that. And even if you have a late night time slot, there's still some things you can't show on TV. What can be aired there is different what could be aired anywhere else. Standards are kind of weird though, of course, you know, as you do. It's also important to note that not all changes between anime and manga are a bad thing, or administered by restrictions. Sometimes it's a creative choice. Cardcaptor Sakura, a show aimed at young teens, famously, the Cardcaptor Sakura anime altered a love story from the original manga between the characters Rika and Tarada. Now, who are Rika and Tarada? Well, Rika is a 12-year-old girl, and Tarada is her teacher, her adult, late 20s teacher. You see where they changed this, and it's not just it was like the dub, it was, the dub also changed it too, but it was at a fundamental level it got altered at the animation studio. You see where they changed this? It's kind of a big deal. Now the anime has implications that Rika has a crush on her teacher, you know, a little one-sided thing, that's okay. But in the manga, it's not a one-sided thing at all. It's a mutual romance. They get engaged and everything, and it's framed as a good thing. Jesus Christ, this manga. But it's not just big things like that, but even smaller fan service gags get changed sometimes. And it's just a natural part of the medium. It's always been that way. I'm gonna cite an example that YouTuber Mimi Yori does in their video about Bocchi the Rock. I'm gonna reference that same video later again. As a scene in the anime K-On! Where it's in the manga and the anime both, Mio, it's a school festival, she trips over the wire of her electric guitar and flashes the entire school body. Yeah, in the manga, they show she falls over and they reveal, you know, her underwear. However, in the anime, they cut to a striped bowl of rice. And that's meant to visualize, oh hey, it's the same pattern as her underwear, and it's meant to show what happened without showing you explicitly what happened. This has been a big part of anime. They do this kind of stuff all the time, visual gags, to communicate more than they probably can show. Hell, want to go further back than that? Remember Dream Hunter Rem, that explicit OVA I'd mentioned at the start of the video? Remember that? The 80s one? Well, that got re-edited in a censored format when the character became popular with kids. And so, kids want to see the show. You can't, though, because the first episode's erotica. So what do? Well, you change it. Yeah, so changes just happen in Japan, and they've happened for years. But because it was less discussed, you just didn't hear about it. It was all the time, but no one really knew about it because it wasn't widely discussed. But with social media and everything being easily shareable online, people started noticing the changes more and more and more that were always going on. And so if, let's say, an anime adaptation made an outfit from the manga less skimpy, maybe a scene where someone is naked is maybe with a bathing suit or, bra instead of nothing, it'd be a big deal. Such was very famously the case with Bocchi the Rock, an anime adaptation made by Cloverworks that takes a 4-panel gag manga and makes it into a pretty good full-fledged comedy. It became a big hit among anime fans and Japanese audiences. But among the changes that a subset of people online got really upset about were all the removed cases of fan service. For example, Bocchi's chest is smaller in the anime, and that's reason enough for nerds online to complain about it for months. There are entire channels devoted to complaining about Bocchi the Rock, an already liked anime, changing the size of the main character's chest. Some people have too much free time to worry about this kind of crap, don't they? And mind you, this wasn't television standards making this the case. This is a choice by the creative crew of the anime that was then signed off on, essentially, by the manga creator. This was explicitly discussed by the show's writer, Erika Yoshida, who analyzed how she felt the overt sexualization was kind of a distraction from what made the show so good, that being the comedy. It wasn't needed, and so they altered it, removed it, or reduced how prevalent it was in the narrative.
More recently, an interview with Erika Yoshida was posted to Kaiyo, a Japanese pop culture website, where she talks about her experience working on Bocchi the Rock, and in it revealed that she and the team purposely cut some scenes sexualizing Bocchi and the other girls from the manga, as she viewed those scenes as just noise. This justification pissed off some people online, and they began accusing Yoshida of censoring the original work and tarnishing it by forcing it to fit her views.
A certain set of fans got really mad, but ignored how, again, the manga's creator was involved in the process, as is typically the case with Japanese anime, and that she had enthusiasm for the adaptation, changes and all. She liked it. So the creator liked it. Bocchi isn't about fan service or nudity. They're just there in certain scenes in the manga, so you can get rid of them and nothing really changes. This isn't a case like a show that's heavy fan service and that's the main appeal getting it removed. No, there was a lot going on here. It's extra, and if you got rid of it, the show's still good. Now, there are some shows out there that if you got rid of the fan service, you lose the core appeal of the show.
Today's the day it shall be mine! Give me your love nectar! Somebody help me! Come back here!
This begs the question, why not make a better story? But there's stuff like Interspecies Reviewers where the content that is shocking is the appeal. It's style as substance as opposed to style over substance. But I think the major problem here is that channels like, say, Chibi Reviews, who create short content on responding to every case of censorship and controversy in the anime field, they kept talking about this topic because it was an easy topic to make videos about. Every day there'd be a new, oh, look at this panel and it's different from this shot in the anime, and you have them side by side, you see the differences. Like, yeah, okay, that's a change, not a big deal. They used to be resigned to trivia websites, about like Yandere Dev's old website comparing Vazefon to Evangelion, nothing important like that. But now it becomes a full channel content slot. But the thing that's so odd is that, again, what he's doing is he conflates Bocchi the Rock changing the main character's boob size with actual real censorship. And what that ends up doing is it takes your eye off the ball. It says, this minor case of one show changing something with the consent of all parties involved is just the same as the government coming in to tell you what you can and can't watch. And that's where I come in, because I don't think that first thing matters all that much. Creative choices are creative choices. There's reasons they do things. Complain about TV practice and standards if you have a big deal about it. But the government coming into your home to tell you what you can and can't watch, that's where I start to get worried. As well as when private companies bully other companies into conforming to their standards of practice for profit, I guess. They are actual problems facing fan service heavy material, as well as any material that has anything erotic, even mildly, in it.
I just passed my new law decreeing that all geeky dweebs be thrown in prison.
Corporations and governments are pushing back against all of these. Noticeably, payment processors like Visa and MasterCard have, over the last several months, began pushing back on distributions for anything containing erotic material.
I think the idea of these big companies, these credit card companies, these processing companies, really kind of dictating what people do, essentially creating their own laws, is a thing for massive concern.
Now, this is well known, this part. During the summer of 2025, the Australian organization known as Collective Shout pressed Visa and MasterCard to deny service to itch.io and Steam for their collection of erotic games. Both platforms began to bend to pressure from Visa and MasterCard, removing or delisting games from their site that didn't meet a specific set of standards and criteria. This included several visual novels from Japan, as well as games with LGBTQIA themes and furry games. Odd how often those later two get conflated with like erotica? You know, they're not really... I digress, again, but it's weird, I don't know. But the point is, a lot of stuff that was possibly scandalous got taken off the shelves, the digital shelves, so to speak. However, this is not a new development from Visa or MasterCard, because they did that last year too. They denied complete service and payment to Japanese websites that were selling explicit material in order to protect their brand. That being Visa and MasterCard's brand. They wouldn't associate with anything dirty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that point about Visa and MasterCard being successful businesses, I think you figured it out, haven't you?
And customers matter to our business?
Maybe is it because that Visa and MasterCard are effectively monopolies? They control 80% of the market? This is classic monopolistic behavior, and yet your testimony here today is you don't want any competition.
And this was confirmed by Seton Kitney, the president of Visa Worldwide Japan. Many Japanese websites don't allow payment processors from Visa or MasterCard anymore at all, opting instead for direct payment from your bank. This includes Nico Nico, Melon Books, Torano Anna, DLS Site, Fontia, Manga Library Z, and Fanzia, among many others, have made it so you can't pay with Visa anymore because Visa keeps bullying them in what they can sell. Companies are preventing you from buying this for yourself, and it's just getting worse, because what they are preventing you from buying, it's unclear what constitutes as inappropriate to them. It could be something mild. The language is so vague, you can't even determine it.
Because Visa is indeed very much restrictive. And what they're saying is that they're not putting in filter terms, but they are saying they're looking at the type of content.
And to make matters more frustrating, government bodies have begun censoring anime as well, and instilling legal punishments for explicit material. And it's not just America either. You've probably seen an article over the time of someone bringing a very explicit manga and arrested for it, or being stopped at the airports for it. And that happens. People have had to explain purchasing Metamorphosis in Canada, for example. And that's explicit, that's extreme, but it's also not illegal. It's a very dark manga, but it's not illegal to own it by any standards of the imagination. And yet, because of the shocking content within, it draws attention, you know? But there are cases where they're solidifying laws in place that can make it a crime to even own mainstream manga. A lot of people by this point know about Texas Senate Bill 20, which made it a felony for the promotion of obscene visual material explicitly containing characters who appear underage. The language is vague, and it's vague on purpose, because it contains everything from CSAM to Dragon Ball. So My Hero Academia and Daisy's Destruction are both the same under the language of this law. And you may think people overreacting, well, at least one store already has taken Dragon Ball off their shelves in compliance in advance with this law. Now, thankfully, no one's been dragged into court in Texas for their Dragon Ball manga collection, but the future remains unclear. It's possible something may happen down the line where this law is enforced. And when that happens, it will create a cataclysm. It will impact the entire industry because a lot of anime distributors come from Texas. Texas is a hotbed of anime production historically. A lot of anime gets sold there. It's a lot of anime fans there. Mexico has a lot of anime fans too, and they're on the border of Texas. So you can see a cascading impact internationally, potentially, from this happening. But you might be thinking, oh, it's just America. In Japan, this won't have any impact. Well, think again, because this push, it's in Japan too. They are anime that are just outright banned in Japan. The greatest example of this is, of course, Shoujo Tsubaki, an infamous independent animated film that, due to its disturbing content, was banned in Japan and most countries around the world. The reason we even have a physical copy of it today, and it's not lost media, is thanks to France, of all places, where it became popular in the film festival circuit and was distributed by French companies, specifically under the name Midori. You might have heard of it from TikTok. But more recently, Japan's far-right party, Sansetsu, has taken steps to further emphasize their various points. In July of 2025, Sansetsu devoted a section on their official website detailing that they saw anime, manga, and games as a cultural asset, claiming that the value of these books and shows were not based on how much they made, but rather how it promoted their culture. And that this party sought to use the Agency of Cultural Affairs to ensure all manga and games functioned as a healthy cultural development. What does that even mean? Well, the far-right party aims to control and censor the anime industry, to use it, to manipulate it, to further their cultural objectives. But that party is not in charge right now. Rather, Sanae Takaichi is the current Prime Minister of Japan and is part of the Liberal Democratic Party, the same party that Love Hina's creator is a part of, not the Sansetsu party. However, despite the name, the LDP is a pretty conservative group. It remains to be seen if Takaichi does push for censorship of anime, but let's be honest here, sometimes someone so culturally opposed to feminism and LGBTQI rights, as well as actively supporting revising historical records of Japan's history surrounding World War II, they're not exactly the type that stays out of the arts for very long. Eventually they will push back, or eventually companies will bend the knee to conform to the agenda presented by the Prime Minister to further fit their perspective. But then again, this group has also pushed back against censorship before. There were laws that Japan tried pushing to censor certain types of explicit material in Japan, and the LDP is heavily responsible for voting against said measures, including laws that would have made CSAM a bigger deal in Japan. As many remember, the creator of Rurouni Kenshin got a slap on the wrist for his collection of that. So I don't really trust the LDP to have the best interests in mind for that topic. You know, let's change gears. It's getting a little depressing. But there's another element to this whole story, another side to this that people are not talking about. Do audiences even want fan service anymore?
I wish I could hear what they were laughing so much about.
They were laughing about how bad you are at life.
I mean, yes, I know some of you do, but do audiences in general who consume anime want it? Well, that's trickier. You know, that's more scandalous than, say, maybe there's a reason why certain anime change the clothing of certain characters. Maybe the companies are trying to market to an audience who increasingly doesn't like fan service. Netflix has confirmed that half of its user base has watched anime at some point. The anime market is pivoting to include Western streamers and distributors as a major asset of its market value. And it's not just America or Europe, but China, India, Brazil's a big market, Italy's a big market, Africa. A lot of countries and a lot of cultures are really in love with anime, and the Japanese media is realizing, hey, we gotta promote to them too. We gotta get them involved because they're paying customers. They buy the stuff and they have to keep going. They have to keep making their bank. Before, they were a small part. America in the 2000s and 90s were not a huge market for anime, but now they're one of the biggest. And so they have to appeal to that demographic to keep selling manga. And while some creators have pushed back on this Americanization of anime, studios are noticing that that's a big part of the market share. And for better or worse, a lot of Western audiences don't want all that erotic stuff in their shows. Increasingly, they're becoming more critical of it. And many have actually said explicitly they think there's too much of it in there, and it turns them off the product if they see it too often. A recent study done by the UCLA Center for Scholars and Storytellers found that teens and young adults, Gen Z specifically, want more animation. They want more animation and less erotic content in their films. 48.4% said there was too much sexual content in media nowadays, which itself is seen a decline in how much is in their films on a regular basis. We're getting way fewer nude scenes today than we did 20 years ago, especially in mainstream cinema. Hell, Most Disney films used to have at least one kiss on the face. Now, you barely have hand-holding. So, you're seeing a gradual decline across the board. Anime may be more popular than ever, but fan service is not driving people to it. Again, going back to Chibi Reviews and those guys, you see these culture critics going to Twitter and saying, ooh, this guy didn't like the fan service in the show, as though it's a big news story next to government crackdowns on content. But like, honestly, maybe that's the voice that the companies are listening to, because they're the loud, maybe they're not the louder voices, but they're the more common voices. You know, who's buying all this? Who's watching all this? The massive market share or the smaller niche market share? There will always be shows for that niche, but maybe the reason that these other shows aren't having as much in there that's explicit is because they're trying to appeal to that larger demographic. And that's becoming more prominent the bigger the audience becomes. And even in Japan, let's be honest here, audiences from the 80s are different from audiences in the 2020s. You know, there's a total difference there. And I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing, because I think a lot of moments in anime, both modern and older, are elevated due to its frank discussion of erotic media. And it's not just, you know, me, a cynical person, saying that it's getting less sexual. Look to the anime veterans. Yoshiyuki Tomino has made some choice comments about stuff like Your Name being far, far, far too clean in its depictions of romance. It's a trend across the board. But maybe there's something else going on here. I've been an anime fan for a very long time, and I've seen some wild shows, and some of them are really great, but a lot feel the same. They feel repetitive. The cycle continues and continues. Unless it's extremely chaotic or distinct, it becomes white noise to me. I'm more moved by character moments than that further the plot and ideas of the narrative than I am animation loops I've seen 100 times at this point, and done better in the past. There are moments in shows like Dandadan and My Dress Up Darling that kind of incorporate fan service with plot and characterization, emphasizing the confusing and exciting times characters are going through when they're first coming to terms with their interests in people in that way. I think, personally, a great scene in My Dress Up Darling that is a fan service scene that really helps further the plot is, it's in the first season, so at the end of the first season, and it's where Marin and Gojo, they spend an evening at a love hotel. You know, hijinks ensue and all that. And it allows us to kind of see these characters who are definitely friends with each other and are flirting with the idea of becoming more than that, and their tensions between the two of them. Their shyness, the insecurities. There's a great little moment where Gojo grabs Marin's waist, and the visual communicates how the little touch sends a new sensation throughout her whole body, throughout Marin's whole body. But it's quick and short, and it's done through visual shorthand that communicates exactly what they're trying to say very quickly. And it focuses more on the characters' faces, their reaction to this moment of touch. It shows us just enough to tell us what's going on, but it focuses more on how the characters feel. It's a character moment rather than a fan service moment, but fan service is sprinkled throughout the whole scene. Some fan service sequences feel voyeuristic, which I think can also be to the show's benefit. And a good example of this is the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is, I think, a very voyeuristic series. Throughout the whole show, we're told repeatedly that we're getting lots of fan service on the way. Next episode, there's gonna be fan service, and like, okay, you prep yourself for it. You expect your cheesy Gainax was known for this. They're known for the Gainax bounce, after all. So in the Gainax show, promising fan service, like, yeah, okay, we'll get to it. And you're waiting, and you know, Daikon, you think, oh, Daikon 4 and 3 had all this stuff, Gunbuster, all this stuff. You think it's gonna be something similar to that. It's teasing and it's teasing and it's teasing, and you're waiting and you're getting more uncomfortable, and then you get what you asked for, but you realize it's not what you wanted. The first hint of it comes in a scene where Shinji walks into Rei's apartment. Early in the show, it's the first, I think it's the 5th episode. He has to deliver this nerve badge to her. It's like a company, an organization they work for. And he's in the apartment, and it's completely minimalistic. There's no sense of personality here. It's like a broken set of Shinji's dad's glasses on a countertop. And he looks at these going, why are these here? He picks them up and looks at them. And in walks Rei, who's just come out of the shower, bathing, whatever. And, you know, it's a teenage boy in a room with a girl he knows who's completely naked, except for a towel on. And the scene what's so uncomfortable is it's shot in almost complete silence. There's all the sounds like mechanical noises outside, and you can see Shinji's discomfort. It's like the same scene with Marin and Gojo from My Dress Up Darling. There's tension, it's uncertainty. You know, it's a girl, you know, who he likes. But Rei has no reaction. The only reaction, that's not true. She has one reaction. She's pissed about the glasses being touched. She doesn't care that Shinji sees her naked, or falls on top of her, or does all that, she has no outward reaction to it. And it's deeply unsettling. It's deeply uncomfortable. You think, oh, it's a fan servicey scene, you've seen it 100 times, but Rei's lack of a reaction makes it go from, oh, it's a cheesy scene I've seen 100 times before in another anime, to this is actually really disquieting, and I don't feel comfortable with this. Something's off here. It's one of many early hints that there's something deeply wrong with Rei, based on how she reacts like this, where her priorities are. And it's a great moment of feeling like you're walking in something uninvited, but also advancing characterization in a way it's really compelling. Another example of fan service being used to promote an uncomfortable idea is in the modern show, Dandadan. This is another one that's kind of voyeuristic, but not really. And again, I'm going to compare it to Evangelion later too. We're going to have more Evangelion discussion as well. But in Dandadan, we see the main characters pursued by aliens who abduct them and want to steal their bananas, as the aliens put it so delicately. This results in several scenes of the aliens, who look like Japanese businessmen, suits and all, you know, very almost like caricatures of them, trying to take the characters and exploit their bodies for their own purposes. These scenes, however, they start off voyeuristic. You're seeing these characters who you like in a compromised position, but then it ends with an exciting action scene. It always gets turned around in some way to be like some shonen action sequence where the characters take power of a situation that's out of their control and turn it around on these aliens, you know, in some way, and to varying extent. And you know, let's be honest, it's a well-known fact that Japanese businessmen in Japan have been known to grope women, especially young girls. There's signs in every train warning people not to do it, as well as reporting it if you see it. And, you know, there's something to be said there for a show about teenagers looking at people who harmed them in real life, taking power for themselves out of a situation that makes them feel powerless. There's something to be said there that's empowering, but also uncomfortable. And that wouldn't happen if you censored everything. But I want to go back to Evangelion again, because there's one scene in particular that I think, well, actually there's two scenes I want to talk about with the same character. And that's a scene where you get this sense of build up to something and you get this sense of powerlessness, but there is no catharsis. It's just discomfort. Throughout the whole show, Misato Katsuragi, she's an adult, the one who's teasing fan service all the time. She flirts and is inappropriate around minors, but you find out that she does this because it's a coping mechanism. She is a traumatized person who has seen some horrible stuff, and the only way she can process her grief and pain is through hypersexualization, specifically either presenting herself as a flirty, careless, carefree person, or by intimacy with people like Kaji, her male love interest. And there are two scenes in the show where we see them make love. And the first time, both times towards the end of the show, after teasing this relationship between them. First time, it's at the end of episode 20, Shinji just got absorbed by Ava Unit 1 and got burst out of him. You know, it's a whole burst out of her, it's a whole thing. But Misato and Kaji afterwards have a moment of intimacy, a private moment together. And the camera lingers off the couple. It lingers on like the corner of the room, a mirror. And you're left in almost complete silence. There's no music, it's just you hear the sounds of sheets rustling, and that's it. And you feel like you've walked in on something that you shouldn't. You feel like you're peeking through the windows of something you really shouldn't be looking at. And you don't get a good look at anything. All you get is the impression of what's happening. You know what's going on, but you see nothing. And it's uncomfortable, it's tense, it's not pleasant. Doesn't even seem like a relief after all the horror in the rest of the episode. You're lingering there, and it's deeply uncomfortable stuff. And it's a disturbing scene. It really has something unlike anything else, I think. But then there's the second time you see them make love. And that's at the end. There's a sequence in Evangelion called the Instrumentality Sequence. The Instrumentality Project, this whole thing that's being teased at the whole show. And at the end of the series, characters' experiences blend. And other people are able to witness every thought you've had hidden your whole life, all your vulnerabilities, all your secrets. And so Misato and Shinji have a moment where each of them sees into the other's heart. And Shinji sees Misato's memory of Kaji in college where they made love. And you see this from two angles, depending on what version of the ending you're watching. If you're watching the end of Evangelion, the movie version of this scene, you see Shinji watching the scene happen. And it's always shot, but you just see their feet. You don't really see anything explicit. And you see Shinji kind of dealing with this uncomfortable scene, and Misato saying, you know, this is a part of me. You have to understand this is who I am, you know, this, that, and the third. In the anime ending, though, I think it's really interesting, the original series ending, you just cut to Misato looking at Shinji, looking over her, and her screaming in horror over it. Her feeling profoundly humiliated, vulnerable, as though she's, you know, not just like angry, but like deeply hurt and afraid that she'll be judged for him seeing her like this. It's intensely voyeuristic and intensely disturbing. This is not a scene that makes you feel good. It's a scene that makes you feel depressed. You feel miserable watching from both angles because you're seeing people at their most vulnerable being examined clinically. And it's upsetting. This is how this can be done artfully. This sequence doesn't show you anything explicit, but you know exactly what's going on, and it's deeply upsetting. It's witnessing voyeurism both from the perspective of the voyeur and watching the voyeur voyeuring, you know? And that communicates a lot. But what about ordinary fan services? We're not talking about heavy stuff, like just fun stuff. Well, you know, that's different, but, you know, as you get older, your perspective on that changes. I'll give you a personal example. I recently decided to rewatch Ranma 1/2. I watched the Netflix remake season 1 before the new show, and I thought I want to watch more before the season comes out, so I'll watch the old stuff again, too. And, you know, these characters, like these goofy goobers, they get into over-the-top silly hijinks. They're fun and silly, and it makes you feel warm and nostalgic, but when I'm watching it now as an adult, it feels different than when you were a kid. When you were a kid, these characters were your age. You know, I read Ranma when I was like 13, 14, and so I was the age of the characters in that story, and so you feel like, oh, I can relate to this. This is a intimate thing I can feel connected to. But you know, watching it as an adult, you're like, oh, it's like you almost have like a parental kind of a parent looking after these kids. You know, and you have a sense of like paternal like affection where you're like, oh, you want to protect these poor kids. Oh, these kids are so sweet. You know. And, you know, it's different. Then you feel like secondhand embarrassment for it. And when you're a kid, when they get embarrassed, you know what they're going through. You feel that embarrassment because you're living through it actively. You know, adolescence is a rough time. It's full of changes. It's full of your body altering and your perspectives changing. And so that's relevant. That's recent. When you're an adult watching it, though, that's the past. You've processed all that. You've come to terms with all that. And so it's like you're watching your stupid children and you feel like a nice warm bond towards them. You know, it's different. There's a spectrum from collecting doujinshi to getting angry when anime adaptations make slightly less revealing outfits. There's a growing subset of people who get angry, who are my age, who get angry that the fan service aimed for teenagers is changing. I don't get that. I really don't. It doesn't make, I don't understand why you're so angry about shows choosing to make something different for a demographic that is shifting, that is different. You are no longer the demographic that's aimed for. That's aimed for teenagers. It's their way of processing very complicated feelings. But when you're 20, 30, like, you have to look at it differently because you're a different person. You're no longer the target demographic. And there's stuff for adults that has that, you know. Just read Black Lagoon, read Hellsing, read, those are old titles too now I'm thinking about it. Read Berserk. And again, very mature, very adult. Got your stuff in there that you want to see. There's whole seinen manga collections and josei manga collections that have adult relationships with adult conflicts, with adult erotica in it. And there's other stories like My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness that deals with the dark side of that as well, very intimately. And I feel like a lot of these adult creators are so obsessed with what the teens are consuming that they're not reading what they should, dealing with adult relationships with their perspectives. I don't know. Maybe just my changing perspectives as an adult. I just find it weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm just out of touch with what people want to see with their fan service shows. I don't know. But I just feel like it's the fan service heavy stuff keeps getting more superficial too. Like it's just fan service and there's no other plot, no characters, no meaningful stuff to it that I want to gravitate towards. Shows have gone to such taboos already that there's nothing they can show you that's shocking anymore. Outside of some shows with morbid fascination to what they're doing, it's like, you know, it's whatever. Some of the characters too I don't like. Like a lot of the moe shows, well, my issue with it is that you feel like they're passively reactive characters. A lot of moe blobs, they're so passive and it's so different. You know, you look at Mikuru, right, from Haruhi Suzumiya, great example of that. And you compare her to Faye Valentine or Revi or Misato Katsuragi. And, you know, Mikuru and these other moe blobs, they're so reactive and they don't have any spine to hold themselves up, where these other women are like, you know, characters with wants and desires and directive. You get complexity there. And I just feel like we're getting such superficial stuff now. I don't know. I think I'm losing touch a lot with why certain people want to see this stuff, because I no longer really am driven to seek it out. And I think as a result of that, my perspective again comes to how these tools can be used to further the quality of writing. How it can be used to tell a stronger story. And so for me, I think it can be art. And we're seeing it becoming art. But you gotta consider always the biggest rule of storytelling. Does it service not the fans, but the story? Okay, it's been a while since recording, so bear with me on this one. Or maybe they're gonna take all your figurines and they're gonna dump it in an Iron Mouse body pillow bag or whatever, you know? Or worst case, a Cinder body pillow. I think we have enough Cinder slander on this channel to last a lifetime at this point. That one is, that one's for you gooners. It's all good.